Welcome to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba. Thanks for joining us. I have Kevin Lund, author, CEO of T3 Custom, with us today. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Talk to me about this book, Conversation Marketing, How to Be Relevant and Engage Your Customers by Speaking Human.
Well, the book is really 20 years of my efforts in the business to get companies all across many industries to understand the need to educate their clients through content. Quite frankly, content can be in the written form, sound bites, or video. But quite frankly, it's about educating customers with information they need to know, but yet helping meet the marketing objectives of the companies that are producing the content. So the book came about because about 2 years ago, I realized there was a lot of good information out there on how to create a content marketing platform or content marketing strategies for companies. And content marketing itself is becoming widely known. There's about $300 billion spent on content in 2018 alone, or projected 2019, excuse me. But there wasn't enough information on how to actually have a conversation and engage with an audience on the other side of the digital divide. So while companies and corporations are busy trying to figure out how to add content marketing to their mix and check off all the boxes by forming, say, a Twitter page or a Facebook page or a blog, they're not paying a whole lot of attention to the quality of the content and how it's written and how it comes across to their audience. So I felt like writing a book that helps companies get to that place of, hey, trying to figure out not only how to have a conversation, but getting people motivated to do something through your words. So it becomes a little bit more of a qualitative process that takes time, while your quantitative analysis is doing a lot of work in targeting audiences. You got to be able to keep those audiences' attention.
Right. Now you're talking about lifetime value. Tell me how brands can maintain a meaningful connection to build that.
Oh, lifetime value is actually where it's at. I'm glad you brought that up, Michael, because at the end of the day, content marketing serves multiple purposes. There's a lot of focus on customer acquisition, but the dirty little secret of content marketing is you're not going to get people right away unless you have some crazy, like Old Spice man, 3 or 4 years ago came out and it was started with commercials, but then he followed up with a Twitter campaign where he was answering questions live. That was a content marketing campaign that really worked to double sales in Old Spice. But what people generally need to understand about content marketing is unless you have those one-hit wonders like that, you're really building an audience over time. And when you build an audience over time, what you're doing is trying to earn trust. And the only way you can earn trust, and I use this metaphor, I didn't make this one up, but you're trying to teach somebody how to take a picture, not sell them a camera. And to be able to do that, you got to educate them on film, and you got to educate them on light, and you got to educate them over time across multiple channels. And over time, they see your name over and over again, and they start to associate your brand with this great information, and they trust your information. You build that audience over time. They start to buy your products, but they stay with you, and you continue to feed them good information. You continue to maintain their trust, and they start to share everything that they're reading with you about you and about your education with their friends, and they just continue to buy. So the lifetime value is a key component. It's retention, not just acquisition.
I agree with you, but one of the other hallmarks that you have about yourself and your company is that you know the keys to gaining the attention. You got to get that first in a crowded marketplace. Tell us how you do that.
So the crowded marketplace is interesting. We do receive over 3,000 marketing messages a day, and a lot of people will ask, well, how is that even possible? I don't watch 3,000 commercials. But every time you look around, if you see a brand name, you can look around your room right now. You can look down at your shoes and see a Nike swoosh. You can see symbols and you hear people talking. So we get about 3,000 of those messages a day, and our brain starts to dismiss almost all of them. So if there's something that you have to say that's unique, you have to come up with something that hasn't been heard a million times, so it doesn't just become part of the noise. So earning attention is really like the first key in the book that I talk about, and that is really trying to create a unique message that essentially replays an old message but in a new way. And you just have to come up with a way of saying it, and that has to do with creating a human tone. You could be creating a personality. It could be using a language that your audience specifically understands. It's not a lot of math, less jargon. There's a lot of little rules that go along with it.
Well, once you've got their attention, and you've drilled down into, say, their passion and their mission and the core beliefs of the company to be able to get that attention getter out of them. Then you've got to hold their attention, the audience's attention, enough to communicate with them and then build the trust. That's another step. Tell me about that.
Well, that becomes the quality of the content too. So again, we're not going to talk channels here necessarily. A lot of it's written content such as, like a blog or something like that, but it could be videos and podcasts too. Your content has to be consistently good. You can't just put something out there, spend a lot of time on it, hope for the best, and hope you're going to win customers and test it to see what happens. You have to have a content plan in place where it's almost this editorial calendar that you need to try out for about 6 to 12 months. And you need to be ready to tweak your content. And you can measure effectiveness. You can see how long people spent on your content reading it. You can see what they did to engage with it if you've got links that go to other parts of your website. But as far as that goes, the quality of the content really has to do with the personality that you're conveying. Are you saying anything interesting? Is there a takeaway? Did you bury the lead? Do they have to read 500 words into it just to understand the point you're trying to make? How memorable is it? Did you make them laugh? Did you incite an emotion from them? The moment you touch on those things, you're going to create a lasting relationship. And all it takes is one good article to make them want to read another one. And then you got to make sure you're consistent with that from there on out.
I agree with you. I mean, anybody who owns a business or is trying to build their business has thought about these things over and over and over again about how do I do it. But you are top of the game in being able to do this. And with that being said, you also have a mantra that it's important to stay humble. I want to hear about that because that resonates with me.
Humbleness is interesting because content marketing has broadened in the sense of it's not really just about putting out content for content's sake. You're talking to an audience. You're engaging with an audience. So let's just say you have a Twitter feed. Humbleness is admitting you're wrong when you're wrong. And that's something a lot of corporations don't do. There's a vulnerability to humbleness as well. But the key to humbleness is don't talk about your products and services. Talk about what I can do to impact your life. We have to treat our companies like people too. Our companies have a personality. And I call it a handshake moment in the book. And this is something that my employees in my firm will hear 1,000 times is how are we going to create this handshake moment? Because people may have heard of your brand and they may even know what you do, but they've never engaged with you. So how do you want to come across in that moment? So at the end of the day, you could have 1 million followers on a Twitter account or a Facebook account, but each person is one individual that you're trying to reach out to. So being humble involves reaching out across the digital divide, having a handshake moment with that person, and really getting right to the point, right to their pain points, and not talking about how great you are, talking to them about, hey, what's going on? Let me help you. How you by virtue of them reading your content, they're going to get a sense of what you can do for them. You don't have to shout about it.
Again,
that's humble.
That's very well put. Thank you for putting it that way too, because that makes it very clear for a lot of people, including myself. Now, there's another part to this whole mosaic, if you will. You've got to select an audience. You've got to be deliberate about what audience you're talking to. How do you go about doing that?
Well, this is what's interesting. At the end of the day, most businesses that are successful have a pretty good idea of who their audience is. It's really a question of where they're hanging out now. You might remember a few years back, it was said that corporate executives wouldn't take social media very seriously, but I don't know a corporate executive that isn't on LinkedIn. So, it's not a matter of saying, oh, well, I have to have a Twitter account. It's just figuring out where your audience is. So if you are a company that's trying to appeal to corporate executives and put out a message to them on a consistent basis, you got to go where they're hanging out. And a lot of that is easily done through boots on the ground, your own experience, or listening tools that are out there right now. You can get social media tools and type in a bunch of keywords and sort of listen in on other conversations without saying a word to figure out where your audience is engaged.
You've got to have somebody that's really trained at doing that to do that. You don't just blunder into it and think, oh, I'm just going to throw a few keywords off of my website and see what shows up. No, there's a little bit more to it than that. That it sounds easy, but I know for doing it myself, it's not as easy as it looks. Wouldn't you agree?
No, it's not as easy as it looks. And that's where sort of the budgets for content marketing come into play. I mean, if you're a big company, you have to get past the idea that content marketing is just this little experiment that might not be around next year. The days of yore, I mean, that's in yesterday. It is a tried and true marketing strategy that if you're not participating in, it's really, you're losing opportunity. And so you could spend a lot of money, and the bigger you are, the better it is. But I do want to say that you could be the owner of a 3-person plumbing company and still have a great content marketing strategy. And there are ways of getting out there to figure out where your audience is hanging out. They may not be as effective as being able to spend $1 million on research and all that every year through a corporate account. But you are right, though, that it does vary. It's not something you can just jump into right away. It does help to hire professionals who know what they're doing, whether you're hiring a consultant as a digital strategist or a firm like mine.
I agree. So we've got their attention. We've started to gain their trust. But in order to really fulfill on that trust and get lifetime value out of this relationship, you've got to be able to start a conversation and with the audience. And sometimes for some people, that's the hardest part. How do I start? Okay, I got their attention. There they are. But how do I start the conversation with them so that I know I'm going to get engagement, or the chances are a high percentage that they're actually going to engage with me? Give us some wisdom on that.
So there's a couple of things there. Imagine you're at a party and you're trying to meet people for the first time. And, you know, it goes to that sort of how to win friends and influence people idea. You know, what's one of the first rules of thumb? You talk about yourself or you talk about the other person? You talk about the other person. You know, I can meet you at a party and say, oh, Michael, what do you do? You know, and start telling me what you do. And I can start asking you some questions about that. Content marketing is very much the same way. You're not really varying from that. You don't have the ability to ask a bunch of questions right away, so you have to anticipate the questions. And ultimately what you're doing is going into a market for the first time and and before you start that conversation, you got to do your research. What are the pain points of your clients? And how can you talk about those pain points in a way that nobody else is talking about? So one of the ways to stand out above the crowd and start a conversation is you don't want to just write another article on, I don't know, in my world of financial content marketing, you don't want to just talk about what is a mutual fund. You might want to talk about the right angles of today's mutual fund. You can say, hey, what about mutual funds that are leveraged mutual funds? Or what about mutual funds that allow me to invest in commodities, which is a 4-letter word in some circles. So you can talk about the very things that people are interested in, just add some flavor. Just talk about something that they may not have already heard. I mean, that's really the first trick, is being unique in your content. And again, keeping in mind, you're not talking about yourself.
Kevin, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this. I'd love to have more conversations because I really resonate with your message, and I know that you're top in your field, and I'd just love to be able to pick your brain from time to time as we go forward.
I would love it, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. You've been watching CEO Money with Michael Yorba. Thanks for joining with us. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and if you would, subscribe to our YouTube channel.